Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of the syndicated talk show, People of Distinction. The talk that gives you an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, alcoleenterprises.com for more info. Email me directly through benji@alcoleenterprises.com if you'd like to get involved with what we have going. And as always, please continue to like and follow our broadcasts. People of Distinction is an internationally syndicated show because of viewers like you. We're available across all major podcast distributors, and people, I mean it when I say it, we would not be here without you, and it doesn't get missed that that is the case, all right? Please continue to show that support. We are truly indebted to you because of it, and if you continue to follow, we're going to continue to put out the content. Now sit back and strap in because we are thoroughly looking forward to showcasing this next guest on our network. And on the line with us today, we have Cottrell R. Carson. And we're going to be discussing his amazing book, Do You Understand What You're Reading? Now, it's available for purchase through Amazon as well as barnesandnoble.com. And people, listen, it is an absolute pleasure, okay? A true delight to have Dr. Carson here on the line. Now, the moment you head on over to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, you start to do research on his book, you're going to understand exactly what we're going to be discussing today. Now, it's a biblical exploration, okay? It truly is an educational narrative. And when we put it in that context of a biblical exploration, you guys know, first and foremost, just to articulate things from my perspective and my background, you know, I've mentioned this on a number of occasions in the past. I've always been someone that is considered myself more spiritual than religious. Now, I'm not going to go into the reasons why really behind it. It's not pertinent to today's interview, but just because I've always felt that way or held that opinion doesn't mean I haven't had my particular interests. And this is a book and an education that I'm going to be looking forward to. I know you all are as well. And at the end of the day, Dr. Carson is the expert. He's written it, he's done the research, and he's going to be able to articulate everything much better than I ever could. So do me a favor, have your notebooks ready. This is going to be a wonderful education. You're going to want to take some notes. But please believe we're only going to scratch the surface here today. By the time we have concluded, you're going to run to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and purchase your copies because you're going to understand how valuable of a resource this book actually is. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Dr. Carson, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How are you doing today?
Doing well, Benji. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, listen, the pleasure is all ours. Okay, we're thoroughly looking forward to this. I really do mean this. Dr. Carson, I think what you're embarking upon here and what you've set forth on is special. Now, before we go into the book itself, Dr. Carson, start by telling our listening audience a little bit more about yourself and your background.
Well, I grew up in an Air Force family. My mother and father are both from Arkansas. And we lived in Arkansas, and I started school in Puerto Rico and came back to the United States, moved to Oklahoma, then finally to New York, and then back here to Arkansas to graduate from high school. From there, I went to Henderson State University and got my BA. And then I went in the Army. I stayed in the Army, went through ROTC while I was in college. And decided after I had been in the military for 6 years that I would get out and pursue my calling, which was to go into biblical scholarship. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did. I went to Southern Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, got my Master's of Divinity. From there, I went to Union Theological Seminary in New York City. Yeah. So after that, I taught at the James and Carolyn McAfee School of Theology in Atlanta, the Graduate School of Theology in Atlanta, and that's about it.
You know, Dr. Carson, thank you very much for articulating all of that. And people, you know what I took from it? Amongst so many things, this is what he knows, right? When you're reading the words on those pages, understand that this is coming from a knowledgeable place. This is not a fly-by-night thing. This is what he eats, sleeps, and breathes, okay? So you understand that the words found on those pages are very informative, and he's done the research to back it up. And without further ado, the anchor for today's interview is all about your fantastic novel, Do You Understand What You're Reading? So without further ado, Dr. Carson, let's jump right in. Tell us a little bit more about your book.
Well, it all started when I was in seminary. I really, I felt called to go and study, but I didn't. I hadn't been a preacher, and I hadn't, held any positions in church and all of that. So I was learning everything. So I was like a sponge, and I remember one class, textual criticism class, where we were looking at the Greek text of the New Testament. That Acts 8:37 was missing from the text, and I couldn't understand why. So that's sort of what I did my project on as a master's student, and later on as a doctoral candidate, I developed. I went in and I found out what the story was, and basically this book is the story of why that verse is missing in some versions of the Bible.
I want to cover inspiration here for a second, Dr. Carson, and we'll jump back into the narrative in a bit. But listen, it is clear to me, right? I'm connecting the dots, and given your background, and as you've just stated, right, pieces of the text that were omitted, you had your own curiosities, and you wanted to embark upon that and figure it out for yourself. So I understand why this was a particular topic of interest to you, and why you wanted to further research and figure it out for yourself. But putting the book together and then putting it out for the public to partake in is a completely different matter entirely. So talk to myself and our listening audience, and what made you feel inspired or compelled to publish the book?
My greatest inspiration was I as a doctoral candidate, I needed a project, and as I thought back over my educational experience, that situation highlighted itself. That situation was something that stuck with me after class, and so I had no idea what I would find, but I decided I would embark on the journey to see.
I love it. Dr. Carson, let's talk about the title of your book next, because there's something that's so intriguing about it, right? Because it's very direct, and it truly gets to the heart of the matter, right? It gets to the heart of the book itself. Talk to our listening audience about what inspired you to really make that title the representation for your book.
Well, it's actually an exact quotation from the passage in Acts where Philip goes up to the Ethiopian eunuch and asks him, "Do you understand what you're reading?" And that whole situation where this eunuch is leaving Jerusalem and reading this text, and Philip is told by the Spirit to go join himself to the chariot, and he does so, but he's not told what to do afterwards. So here he finds himself on foot running besides this chariot, and he asks the only thing that he could. He asks, "Do you understand what you're reading?"
I love it. People, again, we're here on the line with Dr. Cottrell R. Carson. We're discussing his amazing book, Do You Understand What You're Reading? Available for purchase through Amazon as well as BarnesandNoble.com. Dr. Carson, two-part question here with this next one. And, first and foremost, who would you say is your intended reader? I mean, I can speculate and I can try to connect those dots, but I want to hear it from you. Who would you say is your intended reader with this book? And secondly, what is the main message that you hope that they receive from it upon completing it?
I think that the people to whom I write are anyone who can read it and has an interest. I think for sure seminarians should definitely be a large aspect of my audience, but I wrote consciously, writing to pastors and to teachers in the church and to those who have an interest. It's amazing to me how many people I find who aren't even in the church who have an interest in Scripture. And I'm writing to whoever is interested in the topic. I think it's interesting enough that anybody who has an interest should be able to access it.
Mm-hmm. You know, curiosity for myself with this next one, Dr. Carson. I know that this began really as a project, right, as a dissertation for school, but I'm sure it developed over time to so much more. So I want to take this opportunity. What would you say was a highlight for you throughout this entire process? Or if not a highlight, something that surprised you that you weren't anticipating before you began on this journey?
Well, I mean, several things. This is the Acts is the only book of history in the New Testament. So how we read it is very important. Mm-hmm. But some of the things that I discovered were one about the physicality of a eunuch, what they look like. You know, we don't today. We don't have much knowledge about what ancient eunuchs were. When we think of eunuch, so often if we think of anything, we think of someone who's been castrated or emasculated.
Yeah.
But these were people who were national bureaucrats. They were taken when they were children, typically during war, and sold to the palace, and then they had their testicles cut off. Not their penis, but their testicles. Mm-hmm. And this caused certain androgens to not be distributed properly in their bodies, and so they grew breasts like women. They were 6 inches taller than they normally would be. Their arms were 4 inches longer than they would normally have been. The fat on their buttocks is distributed like in feminine patterns. So the eunuch became both a man and a woman in a sense, but his primary function was as a national bureaucrat.
Wow. Listen, people, the education is real. I'm learning so much. And here's the best part. We've barely scratched the surface. I mean, there is so much left on those pages that you're just going to get lost in. The education is second to none. I'm telling you, you got to head on over to Amazon and Barnes & Noble and pick it up. You know, next question here, Dr. Carson, because we've discussed so much information here today. Is there anything that we haven't yet discussed that you really want to make sure our listening audience is aware of?
Well, I think that it's important that people who read the book of Acts and wish to make sense of what they're reading take seriously the very first chapter, verse 8, where Jesus says that you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, all Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. And the apostles didn't understand what that meant. But it wasn't until the stoning of Stephen in chapter 7 that the prophecy begins to come true. When Jesus appears in chapter 7, all of a sudden in chapter 8, verse 1, the disciples are scattered throughout all Judea. And then we come to Samaria, and finally we come to the man from the ends of the earth. It's as if the prophecy that Jesus gave in chapter 1, verse 8 has come true. Very much like in Joshua chapter 2, where the people of Israel are given the land, but they still must go fight for it. Yeah. It's as if the land has been given, but now the church must go fight for it. And so Paul comes on the scene in chapter 9.
You know, Dr. Carson, I'm loving the education that we're receiving here. And final question as we start to close out. And I do want to give you the opportunity and hear it directly from you because, listen, I know a common question that will come up once anybody embarks upon this journey and reads your book is, listen, this is not the first religious text, right? This is not the first biblical exploration to be written on the Bible. So I want to hear it from you. What would you say, Dr. Carson, separates your book from others in its category?
Well, it's unfortunate that there are so few books about the Ethiopian Eunuch story. It's unfortunate, but there are two. But what separates mine is that I bring in knowledge of what an ancient eunuch was. In chapter 3, I show all of the places where the word eunuch is used in the Bible over 50 times. And so that I think that's important.
Yeah.
But also I use an ancient grammar book. When I was working on my dissertation, I was wandering through a bookstore and I found this wonderful book by Professor Kathy Eden called Hermeneutics and the Rhetorical Tradition, which walked me through how reading was taught in the ancient world. And so I incorporate a lot of those reading principles in the writing of this book, so so the reader will learn how an ancient reader would have read texts such as Acts. So I think those two things separate my own understanding. But also I think one other thing, and that is that my book incorporates the largest breadth of information about the Ethiopian Eunuch story. There have been other books written on the Ethiopian Eunuch story, but none have incorporated the church fathers, the modern scholars, as well as our present-day interpreters, and seeing where they all match up. And none have sought to answer why verse 37 is missing, while mine does.
You know where you have to go. Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com. Just get lost in it, okay? Because this is a wonderful education that Dr. Carson has comprised. And listen, it's fantastic for any seminary student, as he's already articulated. For anyone handling the Bible, I'm going to go even a step further. For anyone that's interested in the Bible, interested in just learning more about it, this is a book for you. This is a wonderful resource you're going to want to add to your shelf. It's an even better gift to add to someone else's. So you know where to go. You can thank me later. Head on over there today and get lost in it. Dr. Carson, this has been a wonderful pleasure, okay? An absolute delight. Thank you once again for being a guest on People of Distinction.
Thank you, Benji. Thank you.